Welcome to the race debrief from the Styrian Grand Prix. We're here in Austria with me, Shov, and James. In terms of wet or dry setups, there are a few things you can change. One might be the wing level, but we decided to stay with our dry wing level because that would give us the best pace in the race on Sunday. We knew that the race was going to be dry. There are other things that you're allowed to do within the regulations when it rains because they declare a change of climatic conditions, and you can change the cake tin spec, and that allows you to inject a bit of heat into the tyres to put some more temperature in them, and then they work better in the cold, wet conditions. But fundamentally, we didn't actually change a lot on the car, and it was really just the focus for us was Sunday. It was on the race, making sure we've got the fastest car possible. So Lewis's lap, no, it wasn't really down to a wet setup. It was just down to him driving, getting the tyres in the right window, and a lot of skill, and yeah, fantastic lap in the end. The issues with the curbs, we did a lot of work back at the factory. We had a new installation of that gearbox loom, and that was the component that was really causing us the grief the week before, and it seemed that we managed to make that go away. So we're going to keep an eye on it, just check that we've got the reliability that we need as we accumulate miles on those parts. But there was a lot of good work, and the race was much easier to manage as a result.
The benefit of a wet qualifying is that you now have free choice. All teams have free choice as to what tyre you want to start the race on. And there was really only two choices, the soft or the medium. The week before, you saw that the track temperatures were very high, somewhere around 53 degrees. But on Sunday, the track was much cooler. There was a lot more cloud cover and the ambient temperature was down as well. The week prior, we started on the soft and you saw Red Bull. In fact, a lot of the cars outside the top 10 on that medium compound, perhaps a little bit more durable in temperature, but we were happy with our starting tyre choice. On Sunday, the soft was the tyre that we felt would give the best start performance, the best first stint performance, and the ability really for Valtteri to fight back through Sainz up to Verstappen. And it also gave you free choice as to what tyre you wanted to run on stint 2 of the race. It could be that you could run the hard tyre or the medium tyre, just depending on where you stopped in the race, whereas the medium near enough commits you to a hard if you're stopping early, which isn't as competitive. So ultimately, the way we go about that is we have tools in the background that run millions of simulations. Lewis, during the race, after the pit stop, when he was on the medium tyre, said that the tyres felt to him a little bit softer than the week before. That's one of the mechanisms he uses to describe really how the tyres feel to him in the car in terms of degradation. It prompts us to go and look at the models and make sure that we're happy that the tyres are wearing the way we expect them to and degrading the way we expect them to as well. In other words, will he comfortably be able to get to the end of the race at the rate he's pushing the tyres, or should he manage a little bit more or a little bit less? So that question really prompted us to go back through everything we understand. We have a wealth of information, both from car data and strategic data, on how the tyres are performing. As it turns out, we were very happy with what he was doing. He was managing the race perfectly, and there was no action for him to take. Before the race started, we went through a number of scenarios with Valtteri. The main one he had to get up through Sainz very quickly, but his race was with Verstappen and Lewis ultimately if he had good race pace on the day. With Max, who was either going to start on the soft and the medium, but ultimately start on the soft, you have two options. Either go for an aggressive undercut onto the medium, but you've got to be within 1.5 seconds of him to make that work and have a chance of it. Or force him in, get into his undercut range, and then go very long. The latter of those two options is obviously what we used on the day, and Valtteri used it to good effect. He was able to go 10 laps offset relative to Max, and you use all of that degradation difference that Max will now be experiencing on that medium tyre to catch back up and then overtake him end of race. Around about lap 57, you saw actually Verstappen complaining of his rear tyres. He also suffered a bit of front wing damage, but his rear tyres were definitely in a poor state. And it's that you're banking on. You're banking that he's going to push very hard to build the gap. Your tyres are in a much better state and you're able to overtake him on the track. Things were going very well for Valtteri until we caught up to some backmarker traffic. There was Giovinazzi and Gasly fighting each other for 11th place in front. And they were fighting very hard on track. It was very difficult for Valtteri to get through. And at that time, probably not caught that well on TV, but we lost 3 to 4 seconds worth of race time, which in our world is enormous. So we had a gap of around about 6 seconds to Verstappen before he caught the traffic, and it was around 9.5 afterwards, so a big loss. Valtteri, though, just got his head down, chipped away at it, and caught up, did a great job on the day.
There was a bit of damage on Valtteri's car. The floor around the tyre seal area had broken, and that loses you a few points of downforce. It's quite a sensitive area. But the bigger issue for him was actually some tape, and it was tape that must have come off another car that had got wrapped round the lower deflectors. Now those are the winglets that sit on the uprights at the back of the car. It's a very, very sensitive aero area, and that was actually the big performance loss for him. So we can estimate that from the data that we collect off the car. It's something around 1 to 2 tenths of performance that he would have been missing in that latter part of the race. There are definite benefits going to the same circuit with the same tyres. It does make life easier, and you don't need to repeat all the work that you normally do on a Friday to get all the data that you need to then plug into the strategy simulations. But actually, these tyres are the same tyres as we had the year before. So even last week we went in with a pretty good idea of how they were going to perform. It's also quite interesting for us because you can see how the tyres work on a hot track, on a cool track. You can understand how the car performance varies. So there's actually quite a lot that we can learn and that we benefit from with this format of 2 races in the same place. But I'll let James talk about the strategy because obviously there's big impacts for him in that regard.
Yeah, very much so. So as Shov says, when you go into it, you have a much better idea now of really what your tyres are going to do in different tyre temperature conditions. We had a track temperature that was 33 the week before on Friday and 51 during the race. And during the race on Sunday, it was around about 36. So we get the opportunity to really experience a range of conditions.
What did he say?
This is the way to Budapest.
No 2 races are identical, be it where you qualify or be it the competitiveness of you versus other teams. So in this race, for example, we were stronger than we were the week before, I would argue, with 2 of our cars fighting up front. Now clearly, one thing that comes across is you learn from your mistakes. So as tempted as it was to stop on the early safety car, we fortunately stayed out that time. What you do seriously learn, though, is understanding a little bit more about how to optimize relative to your competitors. When you go into the first race, you don't truly understand how fast they are, where their weaknesses are, where their strengths are, how difficult it is to overtake on track. By the time you get to the second race and the third race and the fourth race, you understand far, far more about the characteristics of that year. So as you repeat a race at the same circuit, it's a wealth of data that you didn't have the week prior, and you keep building on that as you go through. Thank you very much for joining us on this race debrief. This week you have a 2-for-1 offer. Probably next week back to just the one of us, unfortunately. But thank you from me.
Thank you from me. Yeah, we'll look forward to answering more of your questions after the Budapest Grand Prix next weekend.